Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today, I'm excited to talk to Allison Brennan about You'll Never Find Me. Allison is a New York Times bestselling author, and this book is so delicious. Allison, will you give the audience an overview of what the book is about?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
You'll Never Find Me is the first book in a new series. And I'll just give just a little background because this is the fun part. I actually had an idea. I wanted to write a PI series for a long time, and I didn't quite know how it would all fit. And then my daughter, who is a law enforcement officer here in Phoenix, I went to court with her on a personal matter, and we ended up talking to the judge after the hearing. And the judge was just so cool. And he was talking about how he grew up in this huge Mexican American family and how his grandparents were married at St. Mary's Basilica, and just about how Phoenix has changed over the years. And all of a sudden it just clicked. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about a large, long-time Phoenix family. And so I kind of made him Irish Mexican because I'm Irish and I have a lot of friends that are Mexican. So it's like, oh, I can do this. I know I could do this. I'm really excited about it. And then it just all kind of clicked. So the first book focuses on Margo Angelheart, who is my primary character. And she probably will be the main character in all the books, although there are five Angelheart siblings. But I just fell in love with her so much. And she is, I don't plot. So the only thing I knew about the story was that she was helping an abused woman escape her husband, and her husband is a cop, and so did not feel comfortable going to the authorities. And so she basically got her a fake ID, changed her name, and with the help of her uncle, got her out of the state, and that kind of starts the book.
And that's a delicious place to start. I mean, I'm sorry for Annie. I'm sure her being abused is not a delicious place, but it gets us into the psyche of Margo. We understand, I think, from the very first chapter in Margo helping Annie change her life for the better, we see that Margo is going to be a character who is going to make a difference, not only in her own life, but in the lives of her clients. And she's determined, and she's a bit of maybe I might say a little bit of a renegade, definitely a badass, that's for sure.
She's so much fun.
Well, and I'm glad you said that she may be the main character in all of the series, because I really did fall in love with Margo. You want Margo for your friend, because when Margo says she has your back, she means it thoroughly. And so that's one of the things about the Angelheart family in total. There is such a heavy preponderance on family and how much it means to all of them. And I thought you did that so beautifully. Do you have a large family?
I'm actually an only child, but I have 5 kids. So
okay.
And my husband is one of 5 kids. So it was one of those things that I guess my 2 best friends growing up were each one of 4. And I loved going over to their house because they had these big families. They were also the oldest. So they all had all these young siblings. And for me, it was fun and different. Although I will admit, I did like going home into my nice quiet bedroom without being interrupted. Because when you grow up as an only child, you kind of value your quiet and your space. But I did love the kind of the chaos of being in a large family. And then I had my own, and I don't understand sibling rivalry as much. I don't understand a lot of things because I didn't have siblings, but I think I learned from my kids because I have 5. They're 10 years apart. So my oldest is 30 and my youngest is almost 20. And I learned a lot from them. And whenever I have doubts, I just call them up and say, what would you do if your sister did this? Or what would you do if your brother did this? You know?
I love that. So you and I grew up just alike. So I'm an only child as well. And my best friend was the fifth of six. She was, and the only girl. So I saw all that kind of dynamic. She became the alpha, which you would think she would just be the girl with, you know, curly hair and a pretty dress. But no, she became the alpha because she had so many boys to compete with. But I felt the exact same way about my best friend growing up. Her family is very, very tight, even though they have differences in opinions and they will occasionally fight. They are 100% family first. And that was something that was very warm to me because, like you, I could go to Alice's, but I could also go home and just be by myself, which is very comforting to me. Even now as an adult, I like that. So I like to turn off the world and read a good book.
Well, and I think everybody has a family. I mean, we all have families. There are different kinds of families, and there's, you know, big families and small families and blended families. But what I wanted to really do is that even though they don't always get along, and the whole issue with their father being in prison has created this rift in the family, I wanted them to, at the core, be there for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did know, even though I don't plot, I did know that by the end of the book, Margo was going to, you know, that they were going to resolve at least part of their conflict, because I want them to be together. I want them to at least come to an understanding. And Jack, her brother, you know, it's been really bothering him that his family's been so divided. And now that he is, you know, the man of the house, even though he's an adult and he doesn't live in the house anymore, it hurt him that he felt that when their father went to prison, it broke the family and he couldn't put it back together. And so I really wanted to kind of explore those issues and how they all end up working together.
Well, and I felt you did such a lovely job when you have a large family, there's a lot of management to be done in writing. And I am just absolutely flabbergasted that you're not a plotter, because this book takes place over the span of 1 week. And I was going to ask you, how do you keep all of these characters reined in, so to speak, when you only have a week as the book? The book takes place in 1 week, and you don't plot. You just stunned me, Allison. I'm telling you.
Well, I have the setup, you know, so
Yes,
I knew what was going to happen at the beginning, and I knew that there was going to be some sort of crime where where Margo's case was going to collide with Jack and Tessa's case. I didn't quite know how that was. I didn't know. In fact, when I pitched this originally to my editor, I said, yeah, Margo goes into the house and then the house explodes. And then Jack thinks his sister is dead. And, you know, obviously that's kind of how, and I said, nah, that doesn't really make sense. And it doesn't work for the story. So I just kind of made up the rest as I just, what would happen? I just put myself in Margo's shoes. And I'm like going, okay, she has to get in. Well, she's not going to break in. She's willing to break in, but she didn't. But she's going to hop the fence and she's trying to get these pictures, you know, the money shot of this guy who's allegedly cheating on his wife. And so she's walking around the house and I'm like putting her in her shoes. And what would I do if I was a PI with a camera trying to find these two people in bed? And so I kind of follow that. And what would I do if I saw them unconscious on the floor? Well, you know, I'm going to want to help them. So it's like, it just like all kind of rolled. And the best thing about not being a plotter is I know that if I mess something up or if it's not working, there is a delete key. And I can also edit. When I get to the end of the book, I edit as I go. But usually when I get to the book is pretty clean. But I do keep like I have like a little, you know, notepad here that I'll like put notes and stuff, like just, you know, oh, I introduced this character, or don't forget to do this. You know, it's like if I have an idea, half the time I never even look at it again. But at least it's there like as a security blanket. So I could say, what did I name that cop that came to the house? And, you know, I remember once I like had 3 Johns in a book. So I had to go back and change them because can't have 3 Johns.
No, not unless they're working in a prostitution ring.
Exactly. Then you can have 10. Yeah.
So, you know, you do something else too, because there are really two full stories going on at the same time in this book. You have the investigation of the Angelheart agency, and then you have Margo's investigation. And as you say, they intersect at some point in the story. And one of the things I loved is you sort of gave the characters in each story the opposite. Does that make sense? And was that intentional?
By opposite of like,
so with Annie and her husband, he's the bad guy, so to speak.
oh
and
yeah,
then in the other one, the wife is more the bad guy, if you might. So was that intentional, or that just the way they came to you?
it was just the way it happened. I didn't even know who Logan Monroe was when I introduced him, and I ended up really, really liking him over the course of the book. He was just a kind of a different character, and I really liked the way he viewed things and how he was so smart but also very naive about stuff, which I think is sometimes really smart people tend to be naive about just life matters.
That's right.
And I kind of ended up really liking him, so he may come back in a future book.
Oh,
Because
I hope so.
he's such an interesting character.
I'm really rooting for him to come back, because I, like you, I just sort of fell in love with him. I think, it's like people who are uber rich, they have no idea how much a gallon of milk costs. If you're poor and you have children, you know exactly how much that gallon of milk costs. And I do find, and that was one of the things I think that was so endearing about Logan, is he was a nice person. He's someone that you really want to root for, because he was really, really kind-hearted, and I loved his interactions with Margo. And I'm hoping there might be a little spark at some point in the future, because I do like a little romance.
It's funny because I had planned to incorporate a hint of a romance in the book, but it just ended up focusing more on family. And so to introduce all these characters, I wanted to give them the best foundation possible. And so that's why there's a little teeny bit, but it's not a lot.
No.
And it's definitely not even what I would call a subplot, related to her ex-boyfriend. So, but I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to click or
That's
what.
right. That's right.
We'll see.
I love it. And I think because you are what's called a pantser, they can go wherever they go, because I'm sure they will talk to you and tell you where they want to go.
Yeah. I like the phrase organic writer, because
I
that
like that
sounds
much
a little
better
bit
as
more
well.
polite. and
Yes, I agree with you, Allison.
that's just
Organic
kind of
writer is
how
nicer.
it's kind of just how I view the things. It's like everything happens organically to the story and to the characters. And, I try to think, and if I get stuck, sometimes I just throw a wrench in, like throw in a dead body or bring in
Yes,
another character and find out what's going to happen.
that's
And
right.
it's fun. I do edit a lot. Because some things I try, they don't work and they get cut, but that's okay.
It is okay. One author said to me, "Oh my gosh, you should see the deleted scenes folder I have." And she said, and trust me, I've gone back and used those scenes in other books. It's just it didn't fit in this book, but it was so good, I kept it for something else. And I'm like, I love that, because I think ideas that come to us, they may not always fit what we're working on right now, but that idea came to us for a reason, because it is. I sort of call it divine, because I really do believe it. So that is something I wanted to mention, is faith figures into this book quite a bit. And I thought you did it so well. There was no preaching at all. It was just, this was a family who, one of the uncles was a priest. And so that was part of their life. And was that an important part of something you wanted to bring into this book? I don't know whether faith figures into your other works or not.
It depends on the character. Because I think this family, obviously, so my oldest daughter got married 2.5 years ago, and and we got married in the Catholic Church, and I fell in love with her priest, who I very, very teeny bit modeled Father Rafe after. But Father Camus is just this really great guy, and he is from a huge Mexican-American family. And so he was kind enough to let me interview him. And I just asked him a gazillion questions, like, how did you know you were going to become a priest? And what does your family think? And, how kind of, because he has this really close-knit family too. And so I liked incorporating it because it felt very authentic to the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I've explored faith per se in my books, but I mean, depends on the character. I have Kara Quinn in my Quinn and Costa series who doesn't really believe anything. She's a cop. She just does her job. And then I have Lucy Kincaid, who is an FBI agent who was raised Catholic, and she does go to church, especially when she's struggling with something, because she feels a peace there, like there'll be answers. So I think I've kind of just really depends on the character. And then you have someone like Margo, she's trying to do the right thing. And there was a comment, and I'm probably going to get this wrong because I don't quote myself very well, but she's basically saying she swore at her uncle and a parishioner overheard her. And she's like going, well, great. That's just going to extend my time in purgatory. And I mean, she's trying to be a good person, but recognizes, like all of us, that we fall short. And so I do like exploring that, because I think most people are trying to be good, kind people. And obviously there's evil people too, because obviously if you believe in heaven, you has to believe in hell, because they're, I don't think you could believe in one and not the other. But so I kind of explored that with Margo and with the family and her relationship with her uncle, because obviously they had a relationship before he became a priest. And, which I think is kind of fun. And I remember when I was in California, and we were going to this one parish, and there was a priest that was younger than me. And I'm like going, oh my gosh, I've never had a priest younger than me before. It was just like, this is too weird. What happened to the gray hair? And
that's right. And we all know they start somewhere. I just don't want them to be so much younger than I am, because I'm like, oh, well, aren't you supposed to be my mentor, my spiritual leader? And here I am, twice your age. This isn't working for me.
It's just showing me how old I'm getting.
I'm right there with you, Allison. So did you have, I always like to ask this question because I think it's probably a dumb question to ask, but did you have a favorite character? Beside Margo, let's say beside Margo, because Margo is certainly central to this.
Yeah, no, she's definitely the core of the story. It's hard to pick a favorite character because, I like them all for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I think, gosh, you have to ask a hard question. It would probably be Logan as the good guy, because I really liked how he kind of evolved over the course of the book. He actually probably grew more than any other character. I mean, I think Margo and her family, they grew together and they, to come to resolution. But he had like this, because so much stuff happened to him that he wasn't expecting. He had this growth to where he had to make some decisions in his life. And I like that. I also I didn't expect to like Ava, the mom, as much as I did, because she's a little bit of a hard nose. But by the end of the book, I think I understood her better. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a mom. And so I guess maybe I could kind of relate to her like that. But she's tough. She would be a very difficult mom. She would be the disciplinarian, and the dad mm-hmm. was a little bit more like,
men fence, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. So Allison, do you have a website or social media you would like to share with the audience?
So my website is AllisonBrennan.com. Very easy. And all my social media is right there at the top of the page. So I have, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So you can have all the links are up there.
Perfect. Well, once again, the book is You'll Never Find Me. It is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, Allison. I appreciate it.
Well, and I really appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.